Hey everybody, this is Jeff. So I just had to record some things twice, and it was really hard because they were pretty exposition heavy chapters. um, and I was listening back to the second one, and it cut out like a line or two. So I'm probably gonna have to go back and do those. But I wanted to press on, because I love this book. I don't want to get bogged down. So, chapter 3, Sophris. Captain, the river guards. Faline waved one gloved hand their direction. We all have to wait. She looked back at the others. Shakedown. The captain looked sideways at her, as if to say, keep quiet. A jack-booted asshole came clip-clopping to the top step of the lip of the ramp to the city. His mustache was perfectly straight, waxed to dagger-like edges. His rifle was impressive, gold like all his other accoutrements. He wore a ridiculous codpiece and a gorgeous vermilion silk ribbon over his left shoulder. A sword hung at his waist. Behind him were four similarly attired fancy gentlemen. The dangly feathers of his jaunty red cap hung in his face, causing him to twitch his nose as if he might sneeze. He looked pompous, and his face was florid, likely the result of years of strong drink. Gentlemen, my lady, the guardsman bowed, resting the back of one hand on his green cummerbund and extending the other with crossing guard straightness. Are you aware of our policy on firearms and concealed weaponry? Faline whispered to the captain, who whispered back. She reached into her bag and withdrew an envelope. This is a letter of right by Avandi Marshall. The guardsman perked up one eyebrow. He accepted it, looked in, and withdrew a set of 3 pages. Then something else slid into his obscured other palm. He made a joke. The two laughed, mimicking two old friends reuniting after years apart. After a few beats, Bascom spoke proudly and stiffly. Avandi Marshall will be quite pleased with your commitment to her campaign for governor. She is without doubt the finest politician in the Solari quadrant. The man bowed again, even more deeply, walked around the cargo, sniffing about. He met the captain and spoke again. Captain Thraxis, your reputation precedes you. We would have been happy to escort you to your regular quarters. Can we provide any specific assistance to you or your crew? Thraxis sniffed, leaned back, and sighed. Regretfully, Captain, the guardsman beamed, back straight and true. We ain't going to be staying too long, I'm afraid. Inform her ladyship that I will not be able to attend her daughter's wedding. There's simply too much on my plate at the moment. Of course, Captain. Good day to you. Enjoy your stay aboard our humble station. And with a flourish of a green handkerchief, he withdrew into the crowd. As the cargo cleared the exit from the space yard, Thraxis turned to his crew. Well, that's done. Sophris gathered that the captain did not enjoy having to bribe the official, but given the necessity of remaining under the radar, paying good money was better than the alternative, entering the pit of souls unarmed. That's what the locals called Thermopylae after nightfall. What? What is this? Chapter 4. I should be marking these. I don't have a pen handy, motherfucker. Oh, that's. I was just fucking around with a pen. I don't know what I did with it. Chapter 4. Joran. Joran studied the map of the city, doing his best tourist impression, scanning the dirty horizon for obvious landmarks. He prayed that no one he knew would see him. It's much dirtier than in the brochure, Ayanna said. Joran nodded, inwardly amused by Ayanna's commitment to her character. Indeed. I suppose the recession is affecting their fuel sources. They use bee fuel to power the scrubbers. No envirodep anymore to raise a stink, so to speak. The air was stinky, a combination of sweat, tar, strange foods, garbage, fuel, and untreated sewage. Therm was certainly not the galactic paradise it used to be before the collapse. Joran could see a few city workers cleaning up and collecting garbage, but clearly it wasn't enough to make much of a difference. Hey, let's check out this food market. Ayana pointed to a collection of richly colored tents up a side street topped with swiftly ripping. Damn it. Ayana pointed to a collection of richly colored tents up a side street topped with swiftly rippling pennants. Say that a time fast. Dust swirled around the crowd as it surged, most citizens covering their faces as best they could. It reminded Joran of his original homeworld after the environmental system failed. Secundus Salim, known colloquially as Dust World, had once been the natural jewel of the galaxy, a source of massive amounts of every conceivable agricultural product known to man. Food? Here? Our guts aren't adjusted. Eating street food is not a good idea. Even the restaurants are dicey given the poor sanitation. It says so right here in the Interstellar Times. He gestured to his tablet to an article from the previous month. Ayanna rolled her eyes. Have you forgotten my calling already? The goddess grants us the ability to make food and medicine fit for consumption. She affected a haughty pose, glaring. Joran smiled. Yes, dear, you're very special. All right, what are we eating? The next 20 minutes were spent gathering intelligence from the disaffected poor of the station. A few credits here and there, and the tongue started wagging. Apparently, the green shirts had begun hiring thugs to intimidate political opponents of Avandi Marshall, breaking up shops, threatening violence, even disappearing dissenters in black sites. The darkest rumors even mentioned mass graves out in the vast abandoned countryside. As the captain's team approached the edge of the central bazaar, Celine broadcast his impressions. The populace of the station was on edge. Weapons had been spotted on bruisers as well as private citizens. The election was approaching, and incidents of political violence were reported widely. The whole bazaar felt like a powder keg with a short fuse, and the green shirts were all over the place. Making the handoff in this location was going to be extremely tricky. Ayana and Joran hustled along the western edge of the bazaar, Ayana barking orders at the workmen the whole time. If they hadn't attracted attention to this point, they certainly had now. What's up with these green shirts? Spooky shit. First, you just thought they were some corrupt folk. The captain knows them, apparently. And now they're beating people up, disappearing people, mass graves. What? I like this book because you literally have no idea what is going to happen next. Sometimes I don't even know. And I wrote the shit. Uh, Chapter 5. Grundle. Smoke filled the air as Grundle and Portillion made their way along the canal. Here, where the poorest citizens made their homes, coal fires were everywhere. No wonder the air was so hazy. The fuel shortage was only compounding the problem. Sooner or later, the air would get so bad people would start to die if they hadn't already. Portillion covered, wait, would start to die if they weren't already. Portillion covered his face with a scarf he'd purchased, doing his best to blend in with the crowd. His cough was worsening. The three workmen seemed amused by his discomfort. Well, fuck them, he thought. We can't all be hardy locals. Some of us have a higher calling. Grundle, on the other hand, was unaffected. Vorak could generally tolerate nearly any environmental condition. Evolving on a planet full of methane spewing volcanoes and dust storms had made them extremely resistant to the elements. Grund, look! He pointed towards the tall bridge structure that spanned the wide canal. The center of the bridge was raised to allow an enormous ship to pass through. A gigantic crowd of people were amassed around both sides, raising a fuss. Portillion noticed a sliver of black smoke pouring from a window halfway up the structure. Grundle was alarmed. A fire! Gods, these people are in danger. Portillion looked him dead in the eye. Keep your voice down. If this mob realizes there is a fire, half of us will be crushed. At the very least, we'll be prevented from reaching the bazaar. Grundle called out mentally to Sophris, but for whatever reason, he wasn't answering. Grundle looked around for some way that they could reach the bridge in time to stop the fire. He had his answer. Along the edge of the canal's sheer vertical walls, a row of low boats floated at the end of short ramps, their decks covered in tiny huts. No doubt homes and shops of some of the poorer citizens of the Pit of Souls. Grundle shrugged off the knapsack and set his eyes on the distant bridge. He grabbed the large water sack from the cargo and plotted his course. Portillion's eyes widened with fear. What are you doing? Grundle settled into a crouch, one set of fingertips touching the ground like a defensive end at the line of scrimmage. Saving lives. You're welcome to join me. He pointed to his back, taking in a deep, deep breath. A group of citizens saw what he was doing and began to pull away from the canal's edge. Portillion sighed and climbed onto his enormous back. He reached over with his wand and cast a fixing spell on the statue. It would prevent anyone from lifting the statue unless they had magic or an earth-moving machine, which would never make it down these narrow paths full of the vast unwashed masses. Up ahead, murmurs began to give way to a stunned silence. As Grundle rushed into his charge, a shout rang out. Fire! Or should I do that loud? Fire! Fire! No, not really. I'm reading. Sorry. I have a roommate. Fire! Fire! I feel quite silly now. Chapter 5. Grundle. Grundle soared through the air like a cross between an eagle and a boulder, Portillion clutching onto his shoulders, face contorted in horror. He was frantically whispering the words to an anti-gravity spell just to make sure he had them. just to make sure he had them in the right order. Grundle's boots crushed the flimsy roofs of the low boats. He prayed no one got hurt, but in a situation like this, one had to play the numbers. He heard a chorus of shouts and screams, and at least one blood curdling shriek as a wooden roof obliterated beneath his feet. But he kept on moving as fast as he possibly could. Vorak possessed a supernatural ability they called Yawis, loosely translated as momentum, which reduced drag and the cumulative effects of gravity, which meant that once they got going, there was barely any way to stop them other than blocking their path with some sort of heavy barricade. By the end of his run, his feet had begun to slip and bounce across the tops of the boathouses in much the same way as a flat stone skipping across the water. Near the end of the line of boats, he dipped his knees nearly below the edge of the structure and leapt dozens of feet through the air. He stuck out his enormous hand and buried his fingers into the hull of the giant galleon, crashing against it with incredible force. The whole thing shifted and collided with the sides of the elevated bridge. He winced as several pedestrians tumbled into the water below, hollering in terror. A crowd of sailors shouted as the side of the hull crumbled. Grundle drove his fists up the side and kicked out and upwards, rolling half in and half out of the deck. Oi! What the fuck is this? A brawny Yafriti soldier had grabbed a cutting torch and was brandishing it menacingly less than 6 feet from the prone pair. Grundle groined, Grundle groined. Grundle groaned and pointed at the smoke now billowing out of the bridge tower's window. The man didn't bite. The men behind him, however, immediately recognized the situation. A ringing cacophony of voices raised up all around the ship. Fire! 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 Heave to! The motorized oars hit the water, and immediately the danger was magnified. One of the masts had caught in the crossbars of the raised bridge section, causing the now accelerating vessel to creak at an unsettling frequency. Grundle and Portillion rolled to their feet, Portillion clamoring to get his wand out of the folds of his robe. Someone in the bridge was screaming, and other voices began going up and down the tower. Some sort of safety protocol had been initiated, but so far the sprinkler system had not been activated. As the mast started to shear, Portillion grabbed Grundle's hand and ran to the edge of the deck. Reciting the words of his spell, he took 3 steps up the ramp and leapt off kilter into the air. The ship's listing roll gave them a few extra feet of elevation, and then they were falling. Kizarali! With the final syllable uttered, gravity ceased to exist. The inertia of the jump carried them effortlessly into an open window facing the canal, and they rolled over and over through the room beyond. With a quick mental switch, the spell ended, and they tumbled to the ground. Portillion winced as his hand and the wand cracked against the base of the wall. Portillion kept screaming long o- Portillion kept screaming long after the crash. Would have been much cooler if I could have stuck the landing. All right, well, I'll read some more next time. Thanks for listening or watching or whatever. If you want more out of this, if you want me to wear fun costumes, if you want me to do more silly voices, uh, or if you want to share your own work with me, maybe I could read it out loud on the show. Everything is Awesome is the podcast that I'm associated with. And if you like me reading them like extemporaneous like this, cool. But I also read them much more, I don't know, clinically. I get into them more on the show. Everything is awesome. I've recorded myself reading the chapters. I drew cute little pictures for each chapter. It's a whole thing. Check it out. You can find more about my stuff at awesomepod.squarespace.com. And I also have a show called The War for the Tower, which is an actual play podcast set in the world of Stephen King's Dark Tower. And that's super good. Listen to it. It's on all your podcatchers. And also a website for that one, warforthetower.com. I think that's all I got for now. Send me those emails, Shattered Worlds. Wait, wrong show. Everything is awesome podcast at gmail.com. Do that. And on Twitter at EIA Podcast. So I guess that's it. I might do this again tonight. I don't know. If not, I'll see you next costume change. Peace.